Cool. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Warlord Magni, and this is the next installment on my Newb to Warlord series. Today, we're going to talk about fighting legged and legged opponents. So, I'm just going to put this out here that the majority of this video work session is going to be on sword and board, and that's just for the context of typically fighting and going for like leg shots isn't strategically that often used in single sword and Florentine. It's mostly in sword and board where fighting leg becomes like this big strategic challenge. Okay. There's a few cases with single sword where you'll leg somebody. That mostly comes down to when you're like in A range, where it's now easy to hit a leg without exposing your body. Normally, when people are out here, if I want to go for a leg shot, I have to come down. And so, since I'm throwing at a really low area, it exposes my shoulder, it exposes my back, and then most people die off of going for leg shots. So that's why I typically don't throw for legs if you have single sword or Florentine, unless you're really close. So now we're going to talk about sword and board. All right, so the first topic is when to leg your opponent in sword and board. And typically, the way I think about this is that I think you should really only be trying to throw leg shots when you're trying to control or regain control of the fight and control the tempo, right? So if I'm fighting Swatchy and I feel really like pressed by Swatchy, Swatchy's throwing a bunch and I can't like back out. Okay, now I'm going to leg and step out, and now I can regain control of the fight, right? So if I can't back out, Swatchy keeps pulling, then I leg, disengage. Okay, now I can come into this fight and reinitiate on my terms. Okay. What else? Additionally, if you're in like a tournament 1v1 style fighting scenario, if you're like just kind of getting gassed, sometimes it's a good idea to leg, right? And so now if my opponent is legged, I'm controlling the fight. So now I can, pivot. I'm wearing down my opponent typically, right? This is really rude to do in a tournament setting, but it's a viable strategy. So you do what you want with it. I've been in Swatchy's position where I just have been circled for 4 minutes in a tournament, and that sucks. But as the unlegged opponent, I'm able to gain my breath while I am circling, and I'm looking for something to go for, and I'm still wearing down my opponent. And eventually, right, like after you've been kneed for so long, it's gonna hurt. Your knees will get tired, right? So that's another way to regain control of the fight. You can stand back up. You're gonna just be like going up and down this whole time. Yep. So there's a couple of good combos that I would suggest, right? So if you're not just gonna try to gain control of the fight, we're pretty like evenly matched on how much we press, how much we disengage. But you can use leg shots to combo up kills. So the first one and the best one here, let's step. Yeah, this is fine. I just want to make sure we're not at the edge. So first one, easiest one, double leg shot, right? All I'm doing is throw. This works because Swatchy's board foot forward is towards me. If we switch stances, it's going to be the same thing. Or typically, I'm going to go for the back leg first and then come up with the front leg. This is all stagnant. I can do these same exact shots moving. I'm going to switch. So come a little bit further over. Right, so go to the sword foot forward stance. So if Swatchy's feet is sword foot forward, I'm going to move in that direction, right, because I want that leg. So I'm going to move, throw, and while I'm doing that, I am putting myself in between her sword. Okay? So throw. I can step in, or I can step in this way as well. All right? If Swatchy is board foot forward and I want to move, so we're going to swap this side. It's the same thing. I'm going to want to move into that direction. Throw. I really like that combo set because you're coming up and, say Swatchy wants to throw for the cross. I can hit for the arm, or I can double leg. If you know you're fighting somebody that is really fast with dropping, one thing that you can do is if I'm going to go into the side that I'm hitting first, I throw, and then No, go back. I throw, right, Swatchy's dropping, and then I come back, right, and I'm like moving through them, okay? There's a variety of different ways that you can do double leg shots. The thing that you have to be most cautious about is getting caught up on somebody's leg, because if I want to throw and get that leg, or here, let's switch. So if I want to get this leg first and then hit the back leg, if I throw this shot, I have to, because of the angle of the sword is this way, it's moving into the leg, I have to come back route now. Whereas if I go like this, I'm coming down, the angle of the sword is so it comes off the leg, and now I'm open. Does that make sense to what I'm trying to show? Okay, right this way. Here, let's just tilt. No, not so far. Right, the sword is pointed this way, so the sword is actually going to draw into the leg, whereas if I'm flat, the sword comes down. It's easy to draw across, and then I can follow up. Okay. All right, so that's the double leg. You can do it stagnant, you can do it moving. The other thing, the other good combo that you can do with leg shots is you do a leg, and then for somebody that you know that's going to drop, you go for the shoulder slot. So it's leg, and then you chop over onto the shoulder. Swatchy is going to be, it's going to be harder to hit Swatchy on this because one, Swatchy is very small and that's a big board, and Swatchy has her board up to protect her shoulder more, right? So if I'm going to want to hit that, I have to like come over, or she has to tilt. Most people, or like me, I'll hold my board about here. So if you throw it on me, it's going to be easier, right? Because my board is a little bit lower. But I mean, the way that I counter this is that I tilt. But in the case of the combo, right, you'd hit my leg. Yep. No.
Sorry. Oh,
leg.
Here.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right. And then as I'm dropping, people will typically drop into you, and that gives you the height advantage to get over the board. Okay. You can also do this without going for the leg shot. You do a feint instead, right? This works the best if, really quick, this works the best if the shoulder that you're going for is closest to you, right? So if Swatchy is sword foot forward, I'm not going to want to hit that leg because it's one further away. This is the closer target. But if I do this, I now have to come up and around. It kind of works. Just the geometry is a little bit harder to get. But, so talking about the feint, going back, so if you're board foot forward, once you kind of get people to realize of like, oh, you're going to throw for the leg, and legs are like a viable target for you, people are going to start dropping the shield more, or they'll start dipping. So you don't even have to throw, you can just fake up, right? But typically you kind of have to build that, you have to build that response in. Unless you're fighting somebody that's like relatively new and is like really jumpy and reactive, and then you can just like, throw. And then you win. And that's really great. It feels good. The other good combo is arm leg. This works really the best when you're hand matched. So if you can flip to lefty, I'm sorry. So with lefty, right, the arm leg combo works the best when you're hand matched because now everything is in the same lane. So I can shot like flat wrap the arm or full wrap the arm and then follow up with the leg. It's two really quick shots, you know, or I mean, at that point you could go arm, hip, arm, leg. Now, if you flip back, the reason why this doesn't work so well going across, you know, if you're righty v righty, lefty v lefty, is I now have to like come around typically to get that arm and then I can follow up. That is a way to do it, but typically this shot is easier to block, right? I mean, that's kind of like the lefty foo is it's easier to have access to this exposed side. Whereas when it's righty v righty, there's now an asymmetry, right? Or there's actually symmetry, symmetry. So those are kind of like the good combos I typically try to use if I'm trying to get kills off of legs. Double legs are great though. And if people don't respect your range control, and they're just like, oh, I'm just gonna stand here and I'm not gonna move my legs, hit both of those stagnant targets. So do it. It's great. But I would say most often in tournament fighting in Amtgard or like 1v1 spars or on the ditch field, leg shots, when they do happen, are actually an accident. It's not purposeful. And that's because people are typically like going for a hip shot, you know, for a kill. And, you know, whether it's they have bad accuracy or it's a block or deflection, you know, a leg gets nicked in there. And then now you're going from a standing full up fight to one person is leg, one person is standing. Right. So now I'm going to talk about fighting legged opponents. Okay. So you don't really need the glove. Okay. Sure. All right, so again, right, the reason why you leg people typically in a planned area is to control the tempo, right? I'm the one that's controlling when I'm engaging, when we are in range, okay? Whereas Swatchy or your legged opponent, they are having to now be responsive. What they're looking for is to find an opportunity to counter you and kill you out. That's Swatchy's whole strategy, guys. Okay, but that's what people are looking for. Additionally, as a small side point, for all of my friends here that love to fight shield foot forward, when you're fighting a legged opponent, there's almost no reason to fight shield foot forward because the point of shield foot forward is your defense is first, right? But since you're controlling the fight in this scenario, I actually need the reach to be able to hit and get out of range or be able to reach the hard shots and, you know, get that extra like 4 inches or whatever that I won't have board foot forward. Okay. So in this scenario, everything is typically going to be coming from the sword foot forward stance. All right. So, we're going to start off with fighting the sword side leg forward. This is, I would say, the best case scenario. This is typically the easiest fight to wrap up or to clean up. Okay. Again, realize that whenever you're fighting any legged opponent, typically you're going to have to get in close. It's going to require, you know, somewhat of a close grind here. Very rarely are you going to be able to like fight in C range or like the late B range and clean up a fight there. So first shot that I'm always going to look for, here let's tilt a little bit. The first shot that I'm always going to look for is to see if I can get that outside arm or the inside guard. So typically you're like choked up. Most people don't choke up. right? So if I can like get this slot shot in, easy peasy, really nice and squeezy. So that'll be like one of the first openers if I can get in. You know, Swachi's guard is like really exaggerated right now, so go, yep, a little bit more tighter. Alternatively, I'll like come in to see if I can get that outside arm. Those are my first two shots that I typically always throw. Very low chance that I'm going to win off of that, right? So now we're going to talk about the little bit more complicated stuff. The first thing, right, if I'm going to come into range, the simplest thing that you can do is you can just square up. This is what a lot of people do, okay? The only thing that I'm really exposing right now is my shield side leg, but, you know, here, all I have to do is, like, push out and watch where Swachi's sword is going to go. If I get legged, oh well, here I am. And since I'm in close, you know, I can hit that back leg or something like that. Additionally, you can put more pressure. I can pin the shield. You cannot press. If I push Swachi over, that is illegal in Amtgard, right? But if Swachi decides to purposely lean back so I can't get over the board, right? If you don't lean back, I can get the back wrap. So typically people are going to lean back, and if they fall over, that's their fault. As long as you don't push them, right? That is a very fine line. So I try not to do board v board contact because that keeps things pretty clear. But, you know, easy to just like, here I am, square up, and then back wrap. Easiest, like, non-technical way to kill somebody legged. Additionally, the other ways that I'm going to do it is I'm going to go for the back leg shot, right? The live leg. This matters a little bit on where the leg is. So if Swachi has the leg kicked back as far as she possibly can, that's going to make it a little bit harder, right? So if you rotate and then just move the board. So in this case, right, if I just like was to throw, I'm typically missing. From here, I would have to like reach really far back or like actually come up to get the leg. So in this case, right, that's kind of the most safe way for your legged opponent to position their leg. However, if I step offline, Swachi now has very low balance in this plane, right? It's like really easy to push her over. Whereas, if it's in this plane, she's much more stable. So what I will often do in this scenario is a lot of people will try to like lean real far in. This is where you actually defend me. This is where, you know, if people come in, it's really hard unless like she doesn't move her leg, okay? But what I recommend doing is taking a deep, not a deep step, but a moderate step into the sword side. So in this case, the board and everything is going to typically drift into my direction, and then I'm coming and hitting low. And even in this case, it's really hard, like try to hit me or like hit this side. It's going to be really hard for her to get me. I have exposed very little of my body. Again, you're going to have to drop to get it, right? But that's one of like the best high percentage kills that I've gotten off of fighting the sword foot forward. Let's see what else. The one that I like in fighting here, I'll have you rotate. When sword foot forward, but if I want to step into the board side, I'll actually do a stab. Right, so a lot of people are going to expect that, you know, for me to get that back leg, right, because that's the easiest way of access. So that board's going to typically move forward. And so what I'll do boop, and I'll stab in. I am resting my board or like my arm against my leg, and I'm just coming in. If you say you miss, right? The thing is that I can now use this board as a guide to come in, right? So don't throw one stab, throw like 2 or 3 stabs. And you can always combo these up with like fake throws or fake chops as you come in, where, throw or something like that. Or like act like I'm throwing and then coming in and stabbing. It'll help sell it more. All right. Oh, the last one. This one is a little bit harder to do. I would do at like the transition between A and B range is where it looks like I'm coming in, and what I actually want Swatchy to do, or my opponent to do, is to try to hit me, try to take the arm, and then I cross in, right? Or like I'll actually step in more to get the cross. You're not going for the double leg. You're trying to tag the arm on the counter of their counter. Okay. So that's what I would say for most of my strategies when I'm fighting legged opponents that are sword foot forward. Now we're going to talk about shield foot forward. Again, this one's going to be a little bit harder, since stepping in, I have to now step into the sword side, which is where the threat is for me to like actually get a kill. Let's see. So the first thing that I'll do is that I'll do like the same thing that I talked about just recently, is I'll fake low for that leg, hoping that this board moves down, and then I'll chop the shoulder. So I'll like throw over. So if we flip, sorry. I'm acting like I'm hitting that back leg, where I'll throw down, and I come up, and I'm popping that shield side shoulder. This is typically going to be the easiest area that I'm going to be able to hit on a shield side shield side forward legged opponent. Okay. Let's see. I can also do a deep step into the shield side, right? And then I can get in. It's going to be harder, right? Because I'm now having to go like all the way across. But the thing with this way is that you're still moving away from their kill zone. So, or their threat zone, sorry, not kill zone, threat zone. So that is one of the perks of this, right? So typically what I'll do is I'll come in with like a chop, and then I'll throw in for the leg. The chop will help like seize up the guard, or maybe I'll get Swatchy or my opponent to throw at my board so I can still counter the leg. Let's see. You can do almost the same thing that we talked about. I'm going to switch you again. In the sword side, forward leg for the stab, but now I'm going to have to step into the sword side. This is a riskier shot because you're stepping into their threat area, and you can get like armed or killed off of this. But I'll like chop up, and then I'll come in for a stab. Right? It's the same thing. I'm coming in, and then I'm like turning the sword in to stab. Or if I'm pretty confident in my positioning, I can throw down, right, where I'm just like throw, stab. But this is harder because as I move this way, that's typically where the board is going to go, right? So it's a harder thing to sell. The way you're going to have to really make it sell better is like throw on this side and then come over. But that's not a stab, that's a slash to like the arm. This is probably my favorite way of dealing with board foot forward or board leg forward opponents, is that you combo this with like a dark side, right? So a dark side is when I'm throwing like this. And so this is going to require a level change. A lot of these shots are like, I'm having to bend down deep, right? But what I'll do is I'll come in and I'll square up and I'll like plant into like this horse stance and I'll throw that leg. So I'll just come, throw, and throw the leg down or throw the sword down. I'm protecting my body for the most part between my board. This is pretty safe in terms of access to what Swatchy has. If I want to sell it more, I can like do a fake and throw down. Maybe I can get money if I want to like really style. But that's honestly my favorite combo to do. The last thing is doing like a flat chop. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Doing like a flat chop and then coming over for the board side shoulder. Or you can do the reverse, where you throw for the board side shoulder, you're expecting the response on the arm, and then you counter. Okay? So these are just supposed to be some like tools and options that you can begin to try to use fighting legged opponents, and to get you to start to think about the ways that you can get around the guard. Okay? So now I'm going to talk about fighting legged, right? So now you get to stand up, and now I get to be on the ground, right? So again, everything that we talked about on the offense now applies here, but I'm now trying to think about how to defend across those different attacks, right? So the things that you kind of have to think about is that, you know, again, Swatchy is now going to control the fight. Your opponent's going to control the fight. I'm having to be responsive. So you have relatively limited options on being offensive, right? Because I can't control the range. You placing your leg in different positions can control, like, obviously it controls your balance. How I just like pushed Swatchy over really easily when her leg was out like this, right? I have no balance in this direction, but if I want balance in this direction, I can throw my leg out here, right? This raises my body, but now my leg's a little bit closer, and this actually kind of baits my leg, right? So if I want Swatchy to go for this leg, I can now chop and swing the leg out of range, right? So all I'm doing is the sidestep, or that's not really even a sidestep. It's just like a hip swing. But if you have that like hip mobility, I would recommend trying to use it. You can, one of the strategies that I've often seen and I've used, right? So, you know, a lot of these shots are going to be coming for the back leg or like sweeping low. So if you sweep for this low, no, that's the wrong angle. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Right. If you can like somehow pin or block the equipment down in that area, so actually go back to how that was. In this geometry, if I throw right here really hard, I'm actually going to most likely push the sword out of Swatchy's hand or my opponent, because there's leverage across the ground here. So I can do that. Right. Doing that feels really good and you feel really powerful. So try to do it sometime. It's great. But if, you know, say Swatchy comes in, is closer, and goes for a deep sweep, but misses, right? So you're typically going to come in across the ground. No, you're too far over.
Oh, my bad.
Here. Here we go. Right, so a lot of the shots that I was showing is I'm coming out like this. So if I, for example, your board is higher, and I miss and I hit this leg, and you can pin my sword down, I am now controlled. She controls the fight at that case, and she has full reign, unlimited attack potential, and all I can do is defend. And I have to focus on getting my sword back, or else I am booked. Right? So if you can pin the equipment down. Superb. All right, so now we'll go back. Okay, so also when you're fighting as the legged opponent, right? Typically, your opponent is as the legged fighter, your opponent is typically going to be controlling the offensive. But what are ways that you can help rebalance that? And so some of the things that I'll do as the legged opponent, so go into guard, right? A lot of people, the way that they think about combos is that they have to do A, then B, then C, then D. If it gets interrupted, they typically bail or like they have to restart. Not a lot of people can recover unless they're really high tier fighters. And even then, like for me, sometimes I have a hard time recovering. So if you can interrupt that, where, Swachi's going to come in for like the board shoulder trying to get me to respond, and I see Swachi coming like from out of range, it looks like Swachi's going to throw. I'll throw at the hand or like hard at the sword to interrupt that like cadence in their head. And if they get stunned or like off step for a second, like, now I follow up with a secondary shot. As a legged fighter, the other thing that I'm going to focus on, just switch me sides, I'm legged, is that a lot of people that I see fight legged really like to go for the shoulders of the opponent. I don't understand this because, like, maybe it's because you're so used to standing and fighting, but the shoulders are now so much further away. But the hips are in my face. Like, just go for the hips of, like, if I want to go for the shoulder, I have to come all the way up. I didn't hit you in the face. Yeah, right? I have to come all the way up, and this exposes more of my body. Whereas here, this is the same chop shot as up here, but now I'm just legged, right? So work on the hips. If we switch, right, I can also go for this hip. Now, Swachi's board is like oversized for her person, right? But if I can come underneath and get that hip shot, do it, right? So that's what I would say for fighting legged. If in the niche scenario, if the person you're fighting is being super, super timid and they're making you control the fight and, they're like jumping in and out, sometimes, I don't recommend this very often, but you can do a dive attack where like you're far out, or maybe like Swachi's armed. This is really where I recommend this if you're going to do it, is work here. Swachi's being like super, super like evasive and like, I'll throw and roll. That was very like poorly done and orchestrated, but you get the point, right? You're really vulnerable. You're putting all your eggs in one basket on that one shot, but sometimes it pans out. It's only panned out once for me, so take it with a grain of salt. All right. So lastly, when you are legged fighting a legged fighter, a lot of the same things that I've already talked about apply, but the major difference now is there's no range control game. It is just this. We are here. Everything is pretty much locked in. And now we're just, grinding, going back and forth, trying to fake out our opponent. Again, the back leg is always a good option. Don't forget about the back leg. In this case, like, I can hit that leg really easily. The way that I'm positioned is my leg isn't full flat, full angled, perpendicular to me, and it's not all the way back, but it's canted off to like a 60, 45 degree angle. So this kind of gives me a little bit of balance in both directions, where I'm not super unstable in this way, and I'm not super unstable in this way, right? So I have some leverage that I can now move around and control the fight from different angles. Again, it's a balancing act, right? But same setups, everything matters, or everything is pretty much the same in that case. The only other thing that I would maybe recommend, and again, this is now pretty niche, is if you can get your opponent to become acclimated to your guard and like your shot placement. So I've actually done this to Swatchy, in that we'll be fighting. Here, switch me spots. And that we'll be in this leg position, and I'll throw this shot again and again and again. You know, I'm at range. And eventually what happened is that Swatchy got acclimated and stopped thinking that was a threat. But in reality, I wasn't at full range or anything. This was almost a passive guard. And then what I did was I went for a big dynamic throw. And so that made the scenario where Swatchy didn't actually respect my shot, and I won that fight. I've done this to a few fighters before. Again, very niche case. Very niche, but sometimes it pans out. That's all I have prepared for today. Thank you, Swatchy, for letting me hit you. And thank you all for paying attention, and I look forward to seeing you on my next Newb to Warlord series. Thanks, guys.